Hello and welcome to the Sky Blue Times YouTube channel. Today I wanted to give my thoughts ahead of the game against United at the weekend on Sunday, the Manchester derby, talk through some of the stuff with injuries, how the team could look, some of the previous performances, obviously not nice performances to go back and revisit, some of the issues we've seen in the opening couple of games of this Premier League season and where I could see Guardiola going with the team at the weekend against Manchester United. Now, it's important to mention from the very start, injuries. I believe Ruben Amorim has confirmed that Bayindir will be the starting goalkeeper for Manchester United, not their new summer signing. Onana's been moved on to go out on loan and assumably going to depart the following summer. Bayindir is a keeper that has made plenty of mistakes, been very poor from set pieces. So that's absolutely something to keep an eye on going into this derby, that you've got a keeper in net in Bayindir that's just nowhere near the level that a club that wants to compete in the top six, that wants to try and get to European places, needs to be at. Somebody that's consistently made mistakes, consistently very soft from corner routines. So going into the game, that's something to remember. I believe Cunha, Mount, Lissandro and Dalot are all out from injury. Cunha in particular been really important part for their team in the opening few games. Something we'll get onto a bit later, that idea of winning those kind of long ball, second ball situations high up the pitch and then being able to find yourself in good pockets of space, turn and transition and attack the opposition. That's something that United have had success with, despite maybe not being the best performances in those opening couple of games. That kind of particular area is something they've done well in those opening couple of games. Cunha's been a big part of that, and Bomo's been a big part of that. Mount as well, I think, has had games against Manchester City where he's just looked to press very smart and very well against us. And then Lissandro as well is obviously a loss for them. When you look at some of the other central defenders that they do have, particularly on the ball, being able to play out from the back. So certainly injuries from a City perspective that are good to see in terms of players not being in the lineup that would cause us issues in those three in particular. When you look at Manchester City, Stones I believe is a doubt for this game, but not a bigger issue going forward. So it seems quite possible that he doesn't start this game. Marmoush, Aït-Nouri and Cherki are all not going to be involved in this, have bigger injuries. I would have thought Aït-Nouri would be okay, but seems not. So I'd imagine that ankle injury is persistent that he picked up in the game against against Spurs, and then played against Brighton. Did go on international break. So that's a bit of a blow. And then obviously Marmoush picking up that injury against, I believe it was Burkina Faso, playing for Egypt in the international break. Cherki with that thigh injury that we don't really know too much about. Not good news in terms of the injuries there, but when you look at the list that was proposed before the press conference, I think there's a lot of players that are now available. Phil Foden being back in training, Josko Gvardiol in training. These are very important players for the team going forward across the season. That should be starters for the team most weeks, so it's great to have them back. Now, if we just move over to this one here, I spoke about after the Wolves game, this +1 situation, particularly against teams that play with wing backs, with that back five, playing along into Manchester City. Nico Gonzalez playing as number 6. You expect Rodri to do the same as well. Dropping into the back line when teams do play those long balls to be able to win them. And so they weren't looking to press directly the goalkeeper with all of their players on the pitch, and they wanted to force Wolves into playing those long balls consistently. If they were going to play out from the back, then you had Rico Lewis, who was able to make a jump forward. So you'd have this kind of situation here where Lewis has to be aware if he's in the back line or if he needs to jump up. So if you've got Bob here pressing the centre back, Haaland coming across, Rico Lewis jumping from the back line to press the wing back. Ryan is keeping an eye on Andre. Nico Gonzalez still there with that back line to provide the overload in that situation. And when it comes to the game against Manchester United, this is going to be something that's key for the match. How well do Manchester City deal with these situations? If they're able to deal with them well, you think about players like Bruno Fernandes playing those balls over the top. There's going to be a lot of quality balls in behind from him. So dealing with those situations, with the likes of Mbeumo being there, is capable of receiving it and turning. Compared to some of the quality players they used to have in previous seasons, it has improved. They need to be able to manage these situations well to control the game. You control those long balls, second balls, you will control the zone position and you will have control of the match. So that's going to be an important thing going into it. Just to touch on, when we're talking about the Brighton game, the issues there, this is just from one example of City pressing in that situation. I think there are a lot of issues with working out who picks up the man that's spare when you're trying to lock a team over to one side. They had the Haaland pressing the goalkeeper, wingers pressing the two centre-backs that are split. So then you've got a big distance for your fullback to cover, Nunes jumping up to Kuiper, and then with Welbeck dropping, you then have a question of, does Ryan De Silva, do they move across and track that player? Does Rodri have to drop? And in this situation where Welbeck did drop, that I pulled from the game, it's Bernardo that jumps across, Reinders then comes across. I believe Bob comes across as well. But it's Silva who picks up with Welbeck so that Rodri can still stay relatively in the middle and not get completely drawn out, something that Kovacic failed at last season for a number of games, was getting really drawn out to the wide areas and leaving that space in the middle vacated for balls to then get played back into it. But even within that, I think Hinshelwood made the dart and run up this way, then didn't get picked up by anybody. Bob then eventually applies pressure as the ball goes back to Dunk to then force him to play long. But even in that example, Reinders was coming across with Baleba, but wasn't really that kind of tight. And then that's kind of reminiscent of the goal that we saw not too long after that, towards the end of the match, when Brighton did play out from the back into Kuiper, a long ball over the top. Rico has jumped, but then not got close to Iari. Shouldn't have jumped in the first place, but because he's pulled the whole back line and made it a 4v3. You've got Rodri moving across over there. You've got Reinders, who was meant to be tracking Iari, that hasn't tracked him all the way across to that side. So when it comes to teams playing out against City with the setup that they have, when they were playing with a 4 in the game against Brighton, you have to track these midfielders much better when you're trying to lock them over to one side. That was an issue in that match, which eventually resulted in them conceding that goal, despite the many reasons why that goal could have just been easily stopped by Stones heading it out, by Rico not making that jump, by Trafford not going so close to try and deal with the shot. Many different things there, but the main kind of culprit is Rico Lewis jumping at the wrong time, the wrong player. Is Reinders not keeping up and tracking the player as he moves over. They're not in a position to be able to win that duel. So that was an issue. In the Wolves game, as I mentioned, that will be a key factor in this match, in my opinion. Playing those long balls and then being able to win those and win the second balls off that. United will try to do that. City must manage that to be able to control the game. If we go back to just a couple previous games from last season, I've got the home and away just because I think with Amorim it's important to think about those games, really, given that they're playing with the back 5 compared to somebody like Ten Hag. As you can see in this one, this is from the 2-1. City lose it very, very late. If I remember correctly, Grealish has it's from a corner, and Grealish decides to play a back pass under very little pressure. Eventually gets his way to Nunes, who then goes back, and under that pressure, that results in that goal. But yeah, you've got Mateus Nunes over at left back, Kyle Walker at right back, as obviously we can all remember how poor he was, and not really the player that was physically at his best towards the latter years, but also not sharp, not focused like he used to be. So you had a player very much just going through the motions, playing at right back. Diaz Vardy at centre back, which we eventually saw that season to be a very good partnership. But then when you look at the other players, you think Jeremy Doku was in and out of the team with good performances that season, with injuries and so on, trying to put together that next step forward at his career at Manchester City. Bernardo Silva having to play on the right wing. You've got De Bruyne and Foden fit into the team in midfield. Gundogan is at number 6. This is not reminiscent of a team that you would expect from City to be able to control games, control the midfield, to win their duels, win second balls and so on. So it's not really surprised that when you look back at that 2-1, it was actually a match where possession was fairly quite even. Both sides had periods of retaining possession, but then both teams really didn't have much success being able to penetrate the other team. City were, in this game in particular, a team that really wasn't confident in making the runs in behind, runs ahead of the ball and so on. So it really was quite a stale match and kind of got decided by individual errors towards the end. But just looking at the 11, you can see the difference it's going to make compared to the team that will eventually be put out on the weekend. We move over to this one here. This is the 0-0. I think this was one of the games I've written about afterwards, where you could see the plan to be able to play through the middle. This is where you had the two fullbacks outside to hold the width. You had Marmoush, Foden moving inside, and they were trying to find players in the pockets in the half space to then be able to play these balls behind the back line as they kind of draw in the opposition defenders out. So you play into somebody like Marmoush in the left half space. You want to make Mazraoui jump, and then the run of a De Bruyne, a Silva, a Foden, etc. in behind can then get picked out from Marmoush attacking that space in behind. And in this match, they just didn't play the balls quick enough at all to be able to really be a threat in the final third. And then also on the flip side of that, United's kind of natural width with their shape, with the wing backs playing in that back five, with City kind of surrendering the wide areas with their setup without the wingers as the players moved inside. United have very easy access to this space to be able to transition quite quickly and move themselves up the pitch. So we saw some good stuff that eventually for Man City going into the final kind of run of games, where you did see a lot more of a kind of stable City side. We saw kind of parts of that, but not everything come together, and particularly going forward just wasn't very very fruitful for them in this match. But yeah, I expect to see some changes, particularly this kind of not having the wingers, or do we have wingers, and so on. And so if we just move over to this one, I think my guess is this will be the 11, and then I've got three players there I think are a little bit of a question mark over. If Stones is a doubt, then I don't think he'll come into this match. I think Donnarumma will start this one. This is exactly the type of game you bring this guy in for, especially when you know that City are a little bit under the cosh and needing that result. It is a game in a derby where you are going to face good chances are going to be conceded. You're going to need your goalkeeper to stand strong and pull out some important saves. And as I mentioned, this is the games you bring Donnarumma in for. So expect him to start. Vardy, Diaz, Kusanov as that back line. All are in training, all seem to be fit. I think Rico Lewis will get the nod ahead of Matheus Nunes. Rodri again to start this match. And I think you'll see a return to a 3-2 where you have Vardy, Diaz, Kusanov with Rodri and Lewis in front. Have the players Vardy and Kusanov there to be able to defend the channels against Manchester United that will look to attack wide rather than having the fullbacks out holding the width. And then I think you'll have Doku and Bob on either wing, Bernardo, Rodri and Reinders is that midfield, and then Erling Haaland up front. That would be the team I think. I've added Savinho as a question mark, could play on either wing. I think slowly coming back into the team after the situation in the summer with that transfer. It's hard to know the exact timeline on that. I think the Napoli game might be a better option to give him his first start in that Champions League match and kind of work his way into the team off the bench in this game and then start that game. But I can definitely see why people would suggest him to be that kind of option that you might want to play either on the left or on the right hand side. Although if you're going to play him on the right, you would want to take Bob out. You would have to take Bob out. And I wouldn't want to remove him. I think if Foden is fit and sharp in training, then it's absolutely plausible that he gets the start in this game, and I could see him starting ahead of Bernardo to add a bit more creativity in the middle. Somebody that brings that kind of energy that you'd see from Bernardo in younger years anyway, and somebody that has just always performed in derbies. These are the kind of matches for Phil Foden that he could play week in, week out. So if he's fit, if he's sharp and trained, then I can see him getting the nod. I think Nico's a consideration. When we mentioned about expecting him to play more of a 3-2, then this is less important. But one consideration, given that I spoke about the kind of +1 situation, managing long ball, second balls, it's definitely possible that he looks at some of the performances of Reinders off the ball in the last couple of games, looks at the situations that we'll find ourselves in against Manchester United, with them playing balls over the top and play Nico and Rodri. I think that's definitely a possibility in this match. More so going away, I think that kind of stands out, and I think Champions League away games, again, that's a kind of really good pairing if you want to go away and just control the match. and have the midfielders that can really kind of dominate their duels in the air and on the ground. But I think in this match, because it's at home, he's not going to do that. So that would be my pick. As a team, some of the things I think of, as I mentioned, I wouldn't be surprised if Foden or Nico start this game, but I'd lean towards the team that I've listed there. If you have any questions, please let me know down below. Let me know your thoughts on the team, players that you would start instead. Let's jump in, have that discussion. Please make sure you like the video, help support the channel, and make sure you subscribe so you don't miss out on the next video.